Welcome to episode 7, season 2 of Let the Ancestors Speak. I'd like to begin with a libation. I would like to give thanks to all of the storytellers who told us stories of our great beginnings, storytellers who told us of our civilization, storytellers who, even though they were taken away from their land, still kept the story alive of a people and its greatness. And to all of those ancestors, I say, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. I started this episode with a libation in honor of our ancestral storytellers. I stood in front of these 3 paintings from the Hardiman House Collection because they summarize the importance and the function and the practice of storytelling. These 2 paintings I got when I was in Senegal, traveling with my friend Lou Rochelle, and we were on the island of Gori. And while we were there, we saw a lady who had a shop, and in the shop was a woman who made paintings about occupations. So I asked her, would she make me a painting about a storyteller? And she gave me these 2 paintings, and what she was implying to me, this one says, this woman is trustly storyteller. First I thought she was trying to say truly, and then I thought she was trying to say trustly. And then I realized in the duality she was saying both, that a storyteller was someone who was trusted and told the truth, but that a storyteller was also a teacher. That the storyteller talked to the children in the village and then talked to the children in the university to tell them to embrace literature, to embrace their stories, to embrace their heritage. And the intergenerationality of stories is also shown in this print that was signed print that was given to me, that was done by Mandibo Pita, who is a famous painter in Arizona. And again, you see the intergenerational transfer of knowledge. Again, you see the elders teaching each generation. My father taught me about storytelling too, telling me great adventures about how he hoboed his way to college from East St. Louis, Missouri to Memphis, Tennessee, and how he played for the Harlem Globetrotters for 2 weeks, but he gave it all up so that he could hang with my mom and me. As a result of being introduced to story at a very early age, I majored in Western classical literature. But it wasn't until I was invited to teach at the Tacoma campus and had a chance to really explore my ancestral roots of literature that my love blossomed and flourished. When I was invited to teach at the Tacoma campus by Dr. Maxine Mims, she told me I needed to teach my discipline. At that time, my discipline was Western classical literature. And I was confused, I was dismayed because I was going to be teaching older Black veterans, military men, who I thought would not be interested in Chaucer and Beowulf and Shakespeare and Canterbury Tales. So I tried to figure out how to teach, how to tell a story that in fact would have meaning, and how to basically introduce them to a whole continuum of great literature that I thought would enrich their lives. Well, I discovered in a book called The Way of the Storyteller, when I was doing research, that most of Western classical literature had its prototypic beginnings in ancient Egypt. And what happened with that search was I found that there was a rich literary tradition in my ancestral homeland, in Kemet. People understood the importance of story, and not just story on a cultural level, but story on a spiritual level. That story was a cultural, spiritual, emotional, intergenerational, longitudinal transfer of knowledge and values activity. And so our ancestors described one of the very first storytellers as Sboyet, she who tells the story from the sky, from astronomy, from a geometry. I also discovered that the oldest book in the world existed in Ancient Kemet, the teachings of Tao-Tech, that taught about values, that taught about human interaction, that talked about the way we should talk to each other, the way we should behave with each other, the way that we should honor each other. And not only were there books of instructions, but I also found out that there were books that predated the Bible in terms of the story of the Cain and Abel story. Books that talked about the parables of Job in the sense of the tale of the ancient follower who was dismaying about having lost his ship and lost his goods and his material goods, and was told by the serpent who was on the island with him to stop whining, to tell him that he still had his life. He still had his spirit, he still had his soul, and that he still had a chance to proclaim victory. And when I saw stories like this, I was empowered. I also found out about the lies that had been told, the deception that had been imposed on people of African descent. For example, in the book, The Coming Forth by Day, that was when the Egyptogists came and looked at our great literature, they misnamed it. They misnamed it and they narrowed it and they took it down to a single story. And so they called it the Book of the Dead. But it is truly the book of coming forth through night into day. Again, that duality, again, that notion of not being stuck in one place, but understanding that life is dynamic, life is cyclic. All of these wisdoms were kept from us. And so that was one of the origins of Hardiman House, was the notion that in Hardiman House, we would tell the truth. We would expose the misconceptions. We would eradicate the negative images. And so in my library is the first copy of a Hardiman House production called Kemetic Studies, what it was, what it is, and what it must be, talking about how we have to reclaim our history. We have to reclaim our heritage. We have to move from this negative deficit place that we have been put in to one of an asset-based perception. So, I want you all to stay tuned because Hardiman House is going to be producing the resurrection of truth from the chains of falsehood by the 1st of this year. It's a monogram that carries on the tradition of all of these pieces of literature that says to us, we must in fact not restore, but restore. We must bring the truth back into the world about our great heritage. So as I look at all of these artifacts and books from Hardiman House, what I am reminded of is the very first time that the ancestors told me the importance of storytelling from the point of truth. I was at Amina, again, at another slave dungeon. And I went there because I wanted to feel the pain. I wanted to feel the anguish, because those were the stories I've been told. I've been told the stories of being ripped away, of being beaten, of being tortured, of being raped, and taken from a land that was no longer your land, and what a painful experience it was, and what the trauma it had produced. And so I went there to feel the trauma. I went there to feel the pain. And even though I went into the dungeon where they kept the rebellious people, because that's where I thought I would be, even though I went to the door of no return and stood there waiting to feel the anguish, even though I stood on the deck of the ship as I was going back to land trying to duplicate the trauma that my ancestors have felt, I felt nothing. So as I turned to go back to my seat, there was a bulkhead on the table, on the ship, and those things made out of steel where they put the rope, and I turned around and I walked smack dab into it, and I fell on the cement floor of the boat, and I gashed my leg open, and I was bleeding, and all of a sudden I heard the ancestors say, "Pain? You want to feel pain? We'll give you some pain." And I realized that I had come there with all of the wrong expectations, all of the wrong projections for me. That what I was supposed to do was to have gone there to say, hey, I'm a stolen one returning. You can sleep tonight. Because some of us made it. Some of us not only made it, but we survived. We survived slavery, we survived Jim Crow, we survived lynching, we survived integration, we survived Trump, we survived everybody. And we're here because you breadwinners, we want you to know they may have tried to bury us, but they didn't know you were a seed. So, what do the ancestors want to tell us by choosing to make story the topic of this particular episode? They wanted to tell us that it is critically important that we control our story, that we don't get trapped in negative images, that we in fact seek and ingest and embody those images of us that are affirmative. We are not a people of poverty, we are a people of wealth. We are not a people whose lives only existed in yesterday. Our lives exist now and exist in the future. We are not losers, we are winners. And that's crucially important to image and then re-image so we can shift the premise and move back and move again and move up to the greatness of our ancestors, and we can be the story that future generations tell. Remember, like, share, and subscribe.
Orange is the color of my soul. It's light enough, it's dark enough, and all of the shades that it holds. Wait, this might be too deep for you. But it's something new. Sometimes I'm blue when the world spins, wondering when will the pain end. I'm needing to feel orange again.